G'day, I'm Justin Porter, and I don't believe in Jesus. Why I don't believe in Jesus? The same reason why you don't believe in Mithras, the resurrection Roman god, who also rose from the dead, also had a virgin birth, also had 12 apostles. And I don't believe in Jesus is the same reason why you don't believe in Osiris, the Egyptian resurrection god, who was born of a virgin, rose from the dead. Also Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, who also rose from the dead, also was the Son of God, also had 12 apostles, also was persecuted and died, and his followers have salvation in believing with a meal. And so I don't believe in those gods, and that's why I don't believe in Jesus. Now, Jesus is nowhere in history. Jesus apparently died in about the year 33 CE. Now, interesting enough, the first century, there's no writings about Jesus in the first century. We know that Julius Caesar existed, and he lived before Jesus. We have records that Julius Caesar lived. We have coins of Julius Caesar, statues of Julius Caesar. We have nothing from the 30s, from the first century about Jesus. Now, there was Pliny the Younger, who was a Jewish historian who lived at the same time as Jesus, wrote nothing about Jesus. No documents, no manuscripts, anything about Jesus. Now, the Romans were meticulous about keeping records. They kept records on executions, on trials. We even have records of minor Roman governors of the first century. We have no evidence of Jesus whatsoever. We have no idea what he looked like. There's no writings that Jesus wrote. There's no accounts about Jesus at all in the first century. We first hear about Jesus in the late 40s, when the Apostle Paul, who never met Jesus, never met the 12 apostles, he has a spiritual vision of Jesus in the cosmos, and he writes about Jesus, but he didn't meet him in person, and this Jesus is a hallucination. And the first gospel was written in 70 AD. So the first gospel about Jesus was written in 70 AD, the Gospel of Mark. The last book, John, was written about the year 98 CE. So we have no evidence that Jesus existed in the 30s CE. No evidence. Now, interesting to say that the Romans were meticulous about keeping records. We know that Pontius Pilate existed. We know we have inscriptions of Pontius Pilate. He was a real person. Now, just because Pontius Pilate was a real person, Jesus mentions Pontius Pilate, doesn't mean, because there's a book by Stephen King called The Shining, and it mentions that Los Angeles in the 1970s, they wore flares. Does that mean the ghost story The Shining is true? No, because we know that people did wear flares in the 1970s, and there is a place called Los Angeles. And also this criticism, like, why were the Bible writers so honest about their shortcomings? The Apostle Peter said he denied Jesus 3 times, but that doesn't mean it's a true story. There's lots of stories where people did the wrong thing and admitted they did the wrong thing in stories, so that's no proof. Now, there is no evidence for Jesus in the 30s or the 40s AD. We don't hear about the earthly Jesus until 70 AD. And the earliest Christian writings were by the Apostle Paul, who never met Jesus, but he's a heavenly Jesus, a celestial Jesus. Hallucination. Now, Jesus was not history, but he was an evolved idea. The Romans already had a resurrection God. Mithras. The Egyptians had their resurrection god, Osiris. The Greeks had their resurrection god, Dionysus and Attis. Now these are gods that people believed in and worshipped. Now, who invented Jesus? Well, he didn't come straight away, but he was a slow evolution of ideas, not a historical character. Not a historical character. Now, the first Gospel of Mark, written in 70 AD, that's 40 years after Jesus died. Now, Jesus was a political tool invented by the Roman Empire over years to abstract taxes off the people. Jesus held up a coin with a picture of Tiberius Caesar on it. Yes, there was a Tiberius Caesar. We know that in history. Doesn't mean Jesus was real. And the Pharisee says, who do we pay tax to? Jesus said, pay Caesar's things to Caesar and God's things to God. So pay your taxes. Book of Romans, the book of Romans, it says that be in subjection, Romans chapter 13 says be in subjection to the superior authorities, because there's no authority except by God's decree, and he who stands has taken a stand against the authority, the governments, takes a stand against God. So the Roman Empire crafted Jesus as to unite the Roman Empire. The word Catholic, Roman Catholic Church, the word Catholic actually means universal. Universal, right? Now, universal church. Now, Jesus was a universal uniting God under one God to unite the Roman Empire. And in this year 70 CE, the Romans had just defeated Israel in a war. It started in 66. They knocked down their temple, but the Jewish rebels were still rebellious against Rome, a bit like ISIS is today, the Muslim ISIS. They were a threat to Rome. These Messianic Jews who believed that the Messiah would be a man of war and rebellion and lead the nations with an iron rod. Now, the Romans didn't want that type of Messiah, so they invented Jesus as a Jewish Messiah, right, to pacify the Jews. Jesus said, love your enemies. Who were the Jews' enemies? The Romans. Jesus says, if your enemy's hungry, feed him. Who were Jesus' enemies? They were the Romans. If your enemy, give him your coat. The Romans. Be in subjection to the superior authorities, and that superior authority was Rome. And the Caesars of Rome were already considered divine, sons of God. Titus Flavius, in 70 AD, was viewed as his father Vespasian his dad was divine, a son of God. Now, when you think of it, there's nothing new about Jesus. So Jesus fit the pattern, the tool, perfectly to control. Jesus said, keep the poor poor. Rome wanted to keep the poor poor so the poor wouldn't rebel against the rich Caesars. The best way to invent Jesus was, Jesus says, happy are the poor, for they will inherit the kingdom of God. So if you're poor, you'll inherit the kingdom of heaven. So be poor now, because when you die, in the afterlife, you'll walk on streets of gold. You'll walk on streets of gold, yeah? And that's what it was invented about. To Tommy the Apostocat. Tommy, hey, don't chew, don't chew that, Tommy. No. Tommy, no, that's the thermometer. No, that's the thermometer cord. Tommy, say hello. This is Tommy the Apostocat. Tommy the Apostocat. Now, distraction. So when you see this is all made up, mythology as a tool to control the masses. Don't rebel against Rome. Pay your taxes to Rome. And If you're poor, be happy. Jesus, they said, be, slaves, be obedient to your masters. Because if you are, in the afterlife, you'll get rewarded in the afterlife. Not in this life, but in the afterlife. So Jesus was a political tool. And in the year 325, at the Council of Nicaea, the Roman Catholic Church got together of Rome, and they decided what books of the Bible should be kept, and they just kept 4 of them. They got rid of the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of the Book of Enoch, 1st, 2nd, 3rd Book of Enochs. The Gospel of Mary they got rid of. They got there was over 60 different Gospels that they got rid of, and the church knows it. The church knows it. But they don't want you to question this, because if you question this religion, you are threatening their political power, their lives of luxury. They're in control. They're the politicians who get the goods, and the religion, this Christianity, kept the masses humble, meek, and sheep-like. And when you think of sheep and the Good Shepherd, what does the Good Shepherd eventually do to the sheep? He eats the sheep. He eats the sheep. So Christianity was invented as a tool to control the masses. Now we have record, and it's a little bit like the Gospel of Mark, written in 70 AD. It's like writing about Elvis Presley 40 years after he died, when you'd never met Elvis, and then you write about Elvis in a language he didn't speak. You've got to remember, the Gospels were written in Greek. Why Greek? Hey, why Greek? Because Rome and Greek, they shared gods. Dionysus changed water into wine and rose from the dead before Jesus did. The Greek god Hermes walked on water before Jesus did. The Greek god Asclepius cured lepers and gave sight to the blind before Jesus did. So Jesus isn't unique. He was cut out of the same cloth as the Greek gods and the Roman gods, who shared each other's gods, and the Egyptian gods like Osiris, who rose from the dead, virgin births, eating a meal of bread and wine or beer as a communion and everlasting life. 12 apostles, 12 zodiac signs. Have you ever wondered, why is there 12 disciples? Why not 10 disciples? Why not 10 or 7 disciples? Why 12? Because 12 is the sign of the zodiac. Yeah, so this was the Son of God sits in the middle with the zodiac constellations round about. So this was designed, cleverly crafted. And all the other Gospels that didn't fall in line with the 4 Gospels got rid of. People were burned at the stake as heretics. Anyone who questioned the new Christian religion was put to death, and people fell for it because it was so similar to Mithras and Osiris, these other resurrection gods. So it was easy for people to fall for it. And then you backdate it 40 years, and they even change the year. We'll backdate it 40 years to the 30s AD, when Tiberius Caesar ruled. Yeah, but this, when Jesus, in 70 AD, it was Titus Flavius who was Caesar, and his father Vespasian, right? So they backdated it to Augustus Caesar. No, sorry, not Augustus Caesar, Tiberius Caesar in the 30s AD. It was backdated. So if I was to write about Elvis Presley and never met Elvis Presley, writing stories about Elvis 40 years after he dies, and I didn't even, and writing in a different language too. It doesn't make sense. Why were they written in Greek? Why not Hebrew? Why don't the Jews believe in Jesus? Because Jesus was the Messiah, Jewish Messiah, was supposed to be a warrior king and to liberate Israel from Roman domination. And the best way to control the Jews, You couldn't do it through statue worship because they didn't worship statues of Zeus and Mars and Apollo, but you could do it through their literature. You could attack their scripture and say, look, Jesus fulfills all these prophecies. And even one prophecy in the New Testament says this is fulfilled. It says that Jesus, the Messiah will be called a Nazarene, a Nazarene. In the Old Testament, there is no prophecy that talks about a Nazarene, someone coming from Nazareth in the Old Testament. This was added. It doesn't match up with the Old Testament, you know. So these were prophecies were written after the fact, after the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. That's when the book of Mark was invented. And it's not history. It's not history. There is no evidence that Jesus existed. He wasn't not history. He was an idea, an evolved idea. Now, that's all I want to say. Now, I haven't made a video for a little while, had a bit of a break. And I want to give some shout-outs too. I want to give a big shout-out to Alex O'Connor. Alex O'Connor, who was born in 1999, he's English. He did a theology degree, studied religion, a theology degree. He knows the Bible back to front. And I watched one of his recent videos. He's called Cosmic Skeptic. I think he's changed his name. It's just Alex O'Connor now, his YouTube channel. But he did a video where he sits in the middle of a room with 25 Christians sitting around him. And the first one to run to his chair and touch him, he gets to talk to a Christian. So he's an atheist, right? He did a theology degree, he studied the Bible, knows the Bible back to front, but he's an atheist. He doesn't believe in it, right? Now, each Christian would have a different, and I listened to these 25 different Christians, and Alex just won. Alex O'Connor, you won the debate, and he knows about history, he knows about theology, and there was a Mormon. Funny enough, there was one Mormon in those 25 people that talked to Alex to debate with him. One of them was a Mormon. He said, look, I'm a Mormon, bit different than the other Christians. We are Christian, but we have it a bit correct. We're the ones that have the right story. There was no Jehovah's Witnesses in the circle. No Jehovah's Witnesses because they can't debate. They don't debate. But this Mormon explained that Mormonism's a little bit different. And to me, Mormonism is a lot like Christianity because Joseph Smith saw an angel called Moroni in the year 1830. He had a hallucination of an angelic angel where Jesus had a hallucination. No, the Apostle Paul had a hallucination of Jesus in the heavens. Both hallucinations, and they wrote stories. Apostle Paul created Christian mythology before the Gospels were even written. The Gospels were just written down to give this mythological story an earthly character, Jesus, you know. And Alex O'Connor, you nailed it, you won. And a big shout out to Alex O'Connor. Check out his channel, Alex O'Connor, Cosmic Skeptic. And also a big shout out to Britt Hartley. She's an ex-Mormon and she has a channel, an atheist channel on how to be spiritual as an atheist, and her channel is called No Nonsense Spirituality. Brilliant. Check out Britt Hartley on her channel, No Nonsense Spirituality. Check out Bart Ehrman, who is a Bible scholar and an agnostic. He believes in he started out studying the Bible to be a priest, and then the more he studied the Bible, the more he realised that the contradictions in the Bible, inconsistencies in the Bible, and his Bart Ehrman. Check out Bart Ehrman. His YouTube channel is just called Bart Ehrman. And Richard Carrier, he's also a Bible scholar, and he's also an atheist now, agnostic atheist, whatever you want to call them, agnostic atheist, kind of, you know, I don't know if there's a God, but I don't think there's a God. I don't know what happens at death, but I think nothing happens at death. We just don't exist. So I don't know for a fact, but I I don't think there's a God, and I don't think there's a life after death. I don't know for 100% certainty, you know. Now, the story on my beautiful wife, Nicole, she's doing well. She's on her heart medication. She's getting better. Not getting worse, but stable. She's stable. So she's stable and she's on heart medication. And this morning she has gone out to the field service group. So my beautiful wife, Nicole, has gone out to the Jehovah's Witness field service group. And, And we still have a happy marriage. An apostate atheist like me, apostate atheist agnostic, can still have a happy, loving marriage with a Jehovah's Witness. And we get on great. We don't argue, we don't fight. I let her be her religion. It doesn't matter. I don't care what people believe. But it's good to know the facts. You know, if you're going to believe in something, check out all the other side of the opposing side and let people be what they want. And it's really sad if Nicole and I, me as an apostate atheist agnostic, can still have a happy friendship with my Jehovah's Witness wife. Now, she's PME. She doesn't doubt Jehovah. She's full-on PME Jehovah's Witness. We still have a loving marriage. We're still friends. We still love each other. I let her be a Jehovah's Witness. She lets me be an atheist. We get on well. We have love in our marriage. We don't let religion divide us. That's the problem. Religion shouldn't divide friendships, shouldn't divide marriages. Don't let your religious leaders say, don't become unevenly yoked with unbelievers. We're all human. We're all entitled to believe in what we want. If you want to be a Christian, good for you. I'm happy for you. Be a Jehovah's Witness, good for you. It's your choice. But don't shun me. Don't shun me, because you don't have to shun me. Why shun Jehovah's Witnesses? Why can't we all be different? Atheists, agnostic, Christians, Muslims, just live and let live. You know, and that's why I have such a happy and loving marriage. You know, if my wife and I can do it, you Jehovah's Witnesses, stop shunning your disfellowshipped loved ones. Stop shunning them because they have a different belief. Let them be. They're still good people. I mean, you can shun if you want, but I'm against mandatory shunning. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much. And, before I went, I forgot. Yeah, the only Christians that were fed to the lions weren't actually Christians that got fed to the lions by the Roman Empire. They were Messianic Jews that were rebellious against Rome. Rome would have loved Christians. Rome loved Christians because Christians paid their taxes. They were humble and sheep-like. Christians loved their enemies. Were kind, would turn the other cheek. They were placid sheep. Right? Placid sheep. The only people that were ever fed to the lions and crucified weren't Christians, but Messianic Jews who raised the sword against Rome and fought against Rome and rebelled against Rome. Messianic Jews who didn't accept the Jesus that the Romans invented. They were looking forward to a Jewish Messiah that would raise the sword, raise the helmet, raise the shield, and create war against Rome and unite the Messianic Jewish movement against Rome, rebels against Rome. And thanks for listening. Thank you very much. Thanks again, and bye for now.